So I'm super excited and blessed to be here with Jeff Hayes. He's a documentary filmmaker. He's been making films since the 90s. And honestly, I literally just met him a few minutes ago. So this is going to be a very non-scripted, fresh, spontaneous conversation. Nothing you do matters unless what you do matters. I'm Amadon DellErba, and this is Get Real or Die Trying. How we doing, tribe? Amadon DellErba here with Get Real or Die Trying podcast. Just want to acknowledge that we are in a studio here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we got a shop next door to us. So if you hear some banging, some cutting, and some power tools, it's all in the name of progress. And so welcome to my podcast, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So the whole reason why you're here is because of RFK.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll find out there's probably other reasons why you're here too. Like we were just chatting, there seems to be some coincidences and people that we know. And I started following RFK, obviously more recently since his bid for presidency, and definitely a supporter of his. And I've tried to help his campaign as much as I can in my small way with spreading the word through my podcast and through my YouTube channel and so forth. And I saw your documentary and I just loved RFK even more. And so I just want to applaud you. I think you did a really good job.
Thank you.
On capturing the man and the spirit, like the title of it, The Real RFK, because there's so much misinformation, there's so much garbage, so many lies, misrepresentation about him on the internet and in the media, of course. And so, yeah, I just wanted to invite you on my podcast when I heard you were coming to Arizona and just chat with you. And through the process of watching your documentary, then I found out you've made a lot of great documentaries, and you seem to be, from my limited knowledge, getting to know you through just your website and your body of work, you seem to have a great passion for revealing the truth, which is something I do too and I appreciate. And so I thought you were a great candidate for my podcast. So tell me about, I guess we'll start with RFK since that's where it all started, and we can go backwards or forward from there. But tell me about how it came about that you made that documentary about him.
Yeah, so I've known Bobby about a decade. I made a film in 2013 called Bought that was about big pharma, big ag, big food, about GMOs and vaccines, and met him then. And then he wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And so I got them they allowed me to make the documentary, The Real Anthony Fauci. So I made a documentary of that book with him and was exposed to him a lot. He gave me, in 2018, a copy of a book he wrote called American Values, that if you hadn't read it, it's just spectacular. And I'm reading this book and I realized this man has had a shockingly different life than you or I've had. You know, at 5 years old, he's grown up in Hickory Hill, and his house is the weekend White House. And so he's, a 5-year-old, and he's watching decisions being made that are world-level decisions. And this is just the water he swam in. And when he was 9, his father took him to Poland. And Poland, he took the whole family. It was a communist country at that time, didn't want them to come. He was in a government building, and they came out 2 hours later, and there were over 1 million people on the street chanting, "Freedom, freedom, freedom." And just imagine you're 9 years old, and you're being exposed to this. And then at 14, he was 9 when his uncle, the president, was assassinated, 14 when his father was assassinated, then proceeds to become a heroin addict for 14 years. And while going to Harvard, graduating from the University of Virginia Law School, which he went to because his father went there, and now 42 years of sobriety and the wisdom that comes from that, this is a unique soul. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a book written called The Real RFK Jr. by Dick Russell, who's a spectacular biographer and writer. And so I contacted Dick Russell, and he had several people pursuing the film rights to it. And it turned out he had just written a 3-volume biography of a Jungian therapist named James Hillman. And I'm a huge Hillman fan, so we got off on a tangent talking about Hillman for an hour. And by the time we finished, he's like, "Okay, you got the rights to this."
There you go.
And so was able to purchase those rights and start on this film. He wrote the book before Bobby was a candidate, and just because Bobby's life is so fascinating.
It is, yeah. Yeah, that's, what attracted to me to Bobby too is he's a real man. He's experienced a lot of suffering and he's overcome it, and that's a quality that you don't see in a lot of people, and he's humble and he has wisdom and he's courageous and he's relatable, I think, to a lot of people. He's not some guy up on a hill who hasn't lived a life. There's a lot of things that I learned about him that I didn't know by watching your documentary, which is great. And I really appreciated seeing the different sides, of Bobby. And unfortunately, in many ways, the consciousness of this country, I don't know that they're ready to appreciate and value a man like Bobby. But maybe
if they see him, they will.
I was gonna ask you about that. You've been around, you've experienced a lot and made a lot of movies and talked to a lot of people. And what do you feel about that? Because I spend time thinking about that myself. I've met Bobby very briefly and interviewed him, and I had one chance to ask him one question, and I asked him a question that I thought had some depth because I wanted to see what his response would be. And I was very impressed with his response. It had so much depth and wisdom and spiritual integrity to it. Nothing like I've ever seen in a political candidate. They're just very surface level and kind of rote. And so I really like that. But then it occurred to me, do the masses have the depth and consciousness to truly appreciate and value this man?
They have a yearning for it.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't have it, they have a yearning for it. It's kind of
really
like
good way to put it.
With great art, where people, I can't tell you what I like, but, what I know about art, but I can tell you what I like. And there's a yearning in us for authenticity. When you're exposed to the truth, there's a part of me, and I'm assuming it's true for others, that when you're exposed to raw truth, at a level that's not your thinking brain, it's your other brain.
Yep.
And Bobby, he has been forged by not just tragedy, but he's also had the challenge of opportunity, where he grew up with a magical name that opens any door. He is healthy and handsome and, Harvard educated. So he had all these doors open for him. And you see a lot of people, though, that kind of leg up ends up being what stops them from achieving anything. Mm-hmm. And it's, seldom do you see offspring of strong fathers, often raise weak sons. Mm-hmm. And instead, he survived not only his tragedies and grew from them, but he survived the challenge of opportunity. We were filming with him in Aspen, and he's like, "Yeah, when I lived here, when I was in my 20s with Jack Nicholson and Hunter Thompson," and I'm like, "What? You lived here in Aspen with Jack Nicholson and Hunter Thompson?" Can you, and this is, when he was still a drug addict, can you imagine the ridiculous,
they had some conversations.
Yeah, that would be a frighteningly too fun group. And, to grow through that and then temper that with wisdom and his complete lack of a judgmental nature. Mm-hmm. I'm a libertarian. It's like if we were to, go policy by policy with Bobby, I'm I'm not a fan of unions. And here's Bobby during the writer's strike marching with the writers. Like, I don't care. For me, the issue is I'm ready for somebody of character. And if the character's right, I trust the decisions will be right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you just brought up a key word there in character, and that's what I feel he's a man of strong character and integrity. And, so many political personalities, they don't seem to have a strong character. They're more associated with the corporations or, I don't think of them as like, oh, I mean, there are some, I appreciated Bernie Sanders, who I met as well briefly. And, he's been consistent in his what he believes and what he's fought for his whole life, But a lot seem to just kind of go with their personality seems to be attached to the masses. So they just go with the trend and go with what, they feel they need to say to be popular. And Robert F. Kennedy, he's been consistent, and I've really appreciated his courage as an environmental lawyer. He's taken on some of the biggest corporations in the country.
And won.
And won, which is very cool. Many times, not just a few times. I mean, he's won many, many lawsuits. And that's there's not a lot of people who've done that, And so I've really appreciated his love and reverence for Mother Nature and the environment. I really feel that he's tapped into the sacred too. And he says that himself, that he sees nature as a conduit, to experience and worship the Creator, God. And I couldn't agree more, and it's, and he seems to not be separated from the fact that we need nature to survive. And there's such a disconnection in modern American culture about where our food comes from, the water that we drink, the land that we stand on, just our connection to nature. We're just so absurdly disconnected as a country, and we're basically raping the earth for the minerals, for the water, the mining. It's a tough situation because progress in technology demands these minerals that we need, manganese, lithium for all these batteries, et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge conversation, but how do we be stewards of the earth and not, destroy the earth? And I feel like he is a great president to guide and set precedences for the future. If anyone can do it, and have an understanding and respect for the nature and progress at the same time, because he's not anti-progress, but he's about responsible progress and development, So there's a lot of beautiful things about him that I definitely support. And I find it interesting, too, that he is leading in millennials, men and women my age in the polls. And that's not really not that interesting. It makes sense, but I think it's an interesting thing to talk about. And because I think he represents a tenacity and a courage and what's the word? He's bold, that I think people is lacking. Not like Trump bold, because Trump is bold too.
Yes, he is.
He's very bold, but he's bold without caution. To me, that's my opinion. And he's bold without the care of how it affects others. And Robert F. Kennedy's boldness is very calculated. It's very conscious, and it's very aware. And he doesn't just say and do things without taking into consideration how it affects others and how it affects the land, how it affects, the world at large, I think.
Yeah, people don't realize he's got some great counselors on all of these important topics. And I mean, names that you would know, that everyone knows, that are, when I made The Real Anthony Fauci, that book, he wrote it had 2,200 citations in it. It makes some really aggressive statements about Fauci, about what he did, about Bill Gates. And it sold 1 million copies its first year, despite there still to this day has not been a single major media review of the book. But he's never been sued over any statement in the book.
Yeah,
he's got
fact.
350 fact checkers.
Incredible.
So he's not just courageous, he's informed.
Yep.
And, I've watched him. I was with him in Florida a couple of weeks ago for Dave Rubin's podcast. And literally, you can pick a subject, and I've seen it happen once where he's like, I don't know about that subject yet. The rest of the time, somebody asks him a question, and all of a sudden, he starts going deep. When we interviewed him, there's a woman, Sarah Bridges, in the film, and it had happened that I had filmed her a decade ago, so I was using that for a segment of the film. And so I asked him, to talk about Sarah Bridges, and he's like, okay, well, in April of this, he literally knew the dates. He has got a shockingly efficient mind. I watch him, in circumstance after circumstance where he'll go around the room and call everyone by name. He's processing a lot of information, but he's got a lot of people helping him. His love for the environment, people try to trap you in a climate change argument. And there's many people that are concerned about climate change that don't care anything about our environment, the land we stand on, the animals that we share it with. And Bobby's is, from his love of falconry, his is it's fishing, it's hunting, it's a very practical collaboration and a love for the earth. If you turn your back on him, his shoes will be off. I mean, we were at my studio a couple of years ago, and we'd finished filming, and it was a while before his plane was leaving. And I look over, he's got his suit coat off. He takes his shoes off. He takes his socks off. He's laying back on the,
Yeah.
This is a guy who is not happy if he doesn't have his feet on the ground.
Yeah.
His famous dog car that he uses to go hike every day, that if you can survive the smell of the dog car to go on a hike with him, there should be like an extra merit badge you get for hiking, to the hiking plus the dog car. But it's not an ivory tower love of the environment. It's a man with his hands in the dirt love of the environment and understanding of our complete dependence on this earth for our existence. That's not an intellectual pursuit. That's something that you get from being in nature and
being connected to it. Yeah. I also really appreciated how you brought up his spirituality, and his connection to Source, to God, and it wasn't like pushed on people, but it's an important element of who he is. And I feel like in the world today, there's kind of a fear to breach that subject because there's been so many misunderstandings around religion, spirituality. It can often be a subject that immediately separates people instead of brings them together. So a lot of people in the media are afraid to breach it, talk about it or, introduce it. But I appreciate that you didn't steer away from that. You in your mind, my perspective, you weren't afraid of like that subject,
It's the climax of the film.
If
you want to know,
it just goes right to it.
The book, the real RFK, and I wanted to present the real. If somebody doesn't like Bobby Kennedy, they've generally let him be defined by mainstream media, and it's like people talk about misinformation and disinformation. The biggest component of misinformation today is that this is a two-party race this year. It is not a two-party race. We don't, 75% of Americans don't want to have to choose between Trump or Biden, and yet the media's message is, sorry, you have to pick one. There's only two columns.
Yep.
And there's really 5 people running, but it is at least a 3-person race, and the polling shows that. And people have been, are being misled about who he is. I don't care who anybody votes for. That's really none of my business. You've watched the film. It doesn't mention Trump. It doesn't mention Biden. It's not a political film at all. I had an editor quit because he was mad at me for not putting policy type things in the film. I wanted people to know who this person is, to know his character, and then you decide on what policies are important to you. You decide who best represents you, but at least do it from a place of knowing who you're choosing between.
And I think you captured too, so much tragedy in his life. Amazing. I had forgotten until I saw it in your movie that his wife committed suicide. So in addition to his uncle, his father, like you said, 2 of his brothers, then his wife. That's a lot of death, and it's a lot of death, and it's a lot of tragedy to deal with. And I think that if he didn't have God, he wouldn't be the man he is. I think when you experience that type of loss and that type of heart-shattering tragedy, you can turn to 2 places: numbing it, or God, or something bigger than you to go to.
Yeah.
That's my personal belief, and that's from my own experience. There are certain things in life that there isn't a way to articulate or to understand other than the very personal process of divinity and going to something far outside our understanding to seek solace. And he's tapped into that, I think.
I my wife died 10 months and 3 days ago. And I was looking in her eyes as she left, and I saw a glimpse of divinity that I can't put into words and I can't unsee, but it was a glimpse that created an experience for me that changed me. The whole event changed me forever.
Wow.
Within a few days, he had heard that Dory had passed, and he sent me a text when he asked telling me that when he asked his mother if this grief, if this hole inside of him would ever fill. And his mom told him that no, the hole never fills, it stays there. But as you take the qualities that you learn from these people, you make the part around the hole bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And he is, there was a picture we used in the film that you can see when Mary took her life. You can see in his face, and it may be because of my grief, I'm looking at that and seeing more that's there, but it's written, it's etched upon his face.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think all of these experiences are happening for us. They're helping us grow, and I think these have forged him into a unique soul that there's nobody else walking this planet that has had these series of experiences to create the character that he is. I think for him to be elected is going to require a series of miracles, but I have miracles in my life every day.
Mm-hmm.
And so bring them on.
Oh, I love it. Expect a miracle. That's something that my father says often. He's a spiritual teacher and leader, and he says, if miracles aren't happening, then I'm not listening to God, or something's not happening in my life.
Off the path.
Yeah, I'm off the path,
Yep. And you're being nudged back. Yeah. When I stop having coincidences, synchronicities, when that stops happening, then I have to turn around and go, okay, wait a minute.
Yep.
Where did I work like there's no miracles going to happen, but I expect them every day, and I'm rewarded by them every day. Of course, I would sit down with you, and we would have friends in common.
Amazing.
It's because
Why not?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it be? It's all meant to be. We find ourselves right here, and exactly. Well, thank you for sharing about your wife. And I'm sorry, for your loss.
Me too.
But I appreciate your vulnerability and honesty, and I can see the pain and feel the pain. And I've lost people I love too, and yeah, it's an interesting thing. I was going to ask you, when you say you looked into her eyes and you saw divinity in a different way, is there anything you can share that changed in you that might have actually changed your opinion about something in life that you had prior to that, like completely 360'd?
No, it wasn't.
Or more just enlightened you, expanded your perspective?
It was it gave me a surety. I think I can tell this. I may not be able to, but she had the night before had developed a raspy kind of death rattle that people do, or fluid was collecting in her throats, and I walked her all the way home, and this was our plan. I was keeping her drugged, and at the very end, she had a lot of pain. She had a morphine pump, and I was giving her oral morphine and lorazepam. And on the Saturday before she died, she kept trying to get out of bed, and I called hospice, who I thought hospice was going to be there. In our case, hospice visited. Yeah. And so I called them, and they said, yeah, don't let her get out of bed. That's called terminal agitation, and they always fall and they always hurt themselves. It's never good. You got to give her the Haldol. And the Haldol really immobilized her. And so that was on a Saturday. On the Monday night, she had developed enough fluid in the back of her throat, and I would get into her face. She was sleeping with her eyes open, and there was kind of nobody there. And I would get into her face and clear my throat and try to get her to mimic me, and nothing was happening. And the next morning, it was really loud, and I knew that the end was very close. And suddenly, she takes a beautiful, quiet breath through her nose and exhales and does it again, and there was no rattle. And I'm like, how is she even doing this? I mean, it's like there's a physical thing. She's rattling because she's filled with fluid in the back of her throat. And she takes 4 or 5 of these breaths. I look down at my watch, and it's 10:11 in the morning. And I look back into her eyes, and she does 4 or 5 more beautiful, quiet breaths. And suddenly I saw her consciousness return, and I saw her see me, and her eyes became crystal clear, a sea of blue, instead of the murkiness that had been for a couple of days. And I saw her countenance change, and I saw her face relax. And this is just reporting. This is what I saw. But what I knew was she was seeing God and moving on. And that knowledge, that experience, I can talk about it here, but I can't share it with you. It's mine. And what it gave me, I have no fear of death. I've seen it.
Yeah.
And
you saw beauty.
I saw the beauty of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's profound. Thank you for sharing that. Well, in your long career of making films, what are you most proud of?
I'm always most proud of whatever I'm doing currently. I am a true creator. My joy is the act of creation. When I'm creating, I'm mimicking our creator, and it's who I am at my core. So it's always what I've done. Most recently, where I'm headed with my career is I want to do things that lift people, that make people better off than they were. You know, what I love about the RFK film is the underlying message is one of hope. And that's what I want to spend the rest of my career doing. I've done a lot of done series on vaccines or on different controversial topics. And people will try to get me involved in a project, and I always think, okay, is this going to raise the frequency of the conversation, or is it going to lower it? And so I'm most proud of the things I do that raise the frequency of the people involved.
Yeah, that's That's on point. I'm the director of a small media company called Global Change Media, and it was founded by my father. And the whole point of that media is to help bring people's positive messages to the world, basically, and produce content that raises the consciousness, raises the frequency, as you say, and bringing higher consciousness to people. And I feel the world needs that now more than ever. We're so saturated with content that is fear-based and, promotes Hollywood is just full of revenge. It's full of stories of just a complete lack of value, And so I appreciate any filmmaker who's doing that. And I think it's such a powerful medium, documentaries, of course, but even just feature-length, films. And, of course, the series. And now more than ever, content is deliverable in so many different ways. With streaming and we're seeing a lot of the molds of the past, which you're more familiar with than you and I about, you got to have an episode that has to be an hour. You got to have a documentary that has to be this. Now they're making 10 parts and they can be however long they want, 40 minutes one, 30 minutes the next, an hour
I love it.
And I love it too, because it just frees you, and for the creativity of a filmmaker, it's just wonderful, and it's about time, and that is the direction it should go. And there really is no mold or rules to delivering these messages of content to people. And now is the time for people to rise up. And, I know there's always the need to monetize. And I think I saw, I don't know if it was a video or a little clip of another podcast you're on about entrepreneurship and monetizing. And I think that's anyone who's trying to bring good media to the world struggles how to do that. Because frankly, it's easy to monetize garbage, but how do you monetize quality, conscious, spiritual cinema? And have you had success in that, or do you have any words of wisdom or hope to give to those of us who are trying to do that?
Yeah,
Not that we need to monetize, you know what I'm saying, but we live in a world of money. You at least can't lose money. You at least got to pay for the production.
Sustainability is important. So I have two business thoughts. That is, I will only do things that make an impact, and I will only do things that make a profit. Mm-hmm. And those two go hand in hand. I have a foundation that we do our charity work out of, and we give away a lot of money, and I do it on purpose in our charity. In my business, I want to make money, but I live on a paradox where we found about 10 years ago that we give our stuff away for free, like the RFK movie. I've got $1 million in that. And we make it available for free for people to watch. And then about 5 to 8% of the people who watch it choose to buy it. And so once we discovered this model a decade ago, the paradox is the more I give away for free, the more money I make. And so I don't have to worry about the monetization. I have to worry about making quality, making something that is powerful enough that somebody will watch it and go, oh, I actually need that for my library. I want to own that. Mm-hmm. And so that frees me up. And there's been other times that I've made stuff that was narrow, that didn't make money. So another rule of thumb is that I don't make the stuff I want to make. I make the stuff that other people want made. Mm-hmm. And so I don't tell every story that I find interesting. Yeah. I tell stories that have somebody that's yearning for that story to be told.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a really good point. Not making the stuff you want to make, but what other people want made.
Yeah, I want to join a river that's already flowing, not create a river in the desert where there's not one.
Yeah. And that's a good business sense too. And it's also just practical, We, so with RFK film, you said that it was free, but some people gave. Now you put $1 million into producing that. Did you make that back, or is there kind of a game plan that it would be, purchased by a network or a streaming or?
No, we haven't made our money back on it yet. And so really my goal for that film is for 10 million people to see it. If 10 million people see it, I think it will change the course of this election. And so I don't have to think about the money. If 10 million people see it, if 5 to 8% of those people, which traditionally buy what they just saw for free, then it will make a ton of money. So I don't even have to think about that.
Yeah.
I have to think about how can I get this exposed to more people. And it's difficult. We were going to buy $100,000 worth of ads on Joe Rogan's podcast, and then they won't take our money.
Really? Spotify won't?
No. Spotify actually wanted to. We were buying it through Spotify. Joe Rogan's
Joe
show.
Rogan wouldn't.
Yeah, they said we don't want anything political, and we went back and said it's not political. It's a It's a documentary.
Yeah.
And they said, well, we don't even want political adjacent this year. And so Facebook is suppressing it. They're like if you share it on Facebook, if you normally get 300 comments on your share, on this one you'll get 3. And so, what?
Yeah, I was going to ask you about like how do you market it, and if you run into those obstacles, and it sounds like you have, because I've been following RFK, and it wasn't until recently that I kind of heard about your video, and they definitely suppress it. I mean, if you Google RFK, Robert F. Kennedy, the whole thing doesn't come up, or it's. I'm not saying that to say that you're not doing a good job getting your movie to the world. I'm agreeing with you that
this is as hard as it's
they're
ever,
censoring him.
This is as hard as it's ever been. With the real Anthony Fauci, we faced that where I had an editor in L.A. working on a part of it, and he sent me a 10-minute cut for me to review, and he put it on his private YouTube page with password protected, and he called me and said, hey, I sent you that to review. By the time I got home to review it, it was taken down by YouTube for violating their content policy. This is on a private, so it is, the censorship is difficult. With the real Anthony Fauci, we ended up with millions of views. It did a couple of $1 million in sales. And this one will eventually do that.
I think it will. Yeah.
Man, we're battling.
Yeah.
It is hard to get it out, and the people that listen to your podcast, I hope they go watch it for free. The ones that want to can buy it. But man, whatever you do, if it's moving to you, share it.
Yeah. But we bought it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll just let. This is going to grow person to person, people who I think I've delivered a film of value that's worthy of, it's not just money you pay for stuff with, it's also your time and attention.
Yeah.
And I think that his life story is worthy of the time and attention.
Have you approached any influencers on social media who do support RFK? Like I know there's Aubrey Marcus, and he's in the likes of Joe Rogan. I think he's a friend. He co-owns a company with Joe Rogan, but he has a pretty large podcast audience, and he openly shares his support of RFK. I think he would be a good one maybe to share.
Yeah, I'm talking to Aubrey. And Aubrey is somebody I know. I met Theo Vaughn at an event, and we talked for a minute. But literally, your strategy, that's literally my next step, is I made a list of every podcast that Bobby has been on, and I'm going through those and systematically seeing, can we get on there? Can we buy ads on there?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be
the only way, I mean, we know the mainstream media is not going to give you the time of day, and like you said, even some will refuse the ads because of the political. But I think that there will be some that will support it. Absolutely, I definitely will. I don't have the reach that Aubrey does, but I'm definitely going to spread it.
Yeah, neither do I. And so, but collectively we can do this. And I also think, where, I was at a dinner with Tony Robbins 2 weeks ago because of a fundraiser for Bobby. So there was a dozen of us there. But what are the odds? I'm in Palm Beach with Tony Robbins and Sage, his wife. What are the odds of that? That wasn't something I predicted or expected. And then last week we were in Dallas for a fundraiser at the old Parkland hospital. It's called Old Parkland now, where Trammell Crow's company bought the hospital Parkland, which is where JFK was taken after he was shot and where he passed away. That whole campus they've converted into a spectacular office space, and they only rent to family offices. So all these rich people that have family offices have their offices there at Old Parkland. And it is the largest concentration of wealth in the United States.
Wow.
And so because of promoting this film and helping support Bobby, I'm in the room with it. It's like,
Yeah.
so who knows, because of being on your podcast, who knows who I'll meet? This is what I'm talking about, expecting a miracle.
Yeah.
I just show up and I know something wonderful is going to happen, and I keep my eyes peeled, looking for where it is.
Yeah. Well, good for you to do that. I appreciate that. I read that you have 11 children.
It was
That's wonderful.
it took a number of wives to do that. It wasn't one
That was
poor
going to be
woman.
my next question.
It wasn't one poor woman spitting out kids every. But my first wife and I had 4 kids by the time I was 25, and then when we got divorced, I got custody of the children, and then I married a woman and with 2 small kids, and we adopted her kids, and then we had a son, Charlie, who 5 years later passed away, and then her other son, Perry, ended up coming to live with me. So I was a single dad with 5 kids. If you can imagine how attractive that made me.
Wow.
for dating. It was, and then I ended up marrying a woman with 3 small kids, and so I had 8 at home at one point.
Wow.
And we were married for 15 years, and then got divorced, and then ended up marrying the love of my life, Dory, and she had 2 kids. So it's not really,
Gotcha.
you can't disavow, it's like, so Dory's kids became mine,
Yeah.
even though they were adults. So
Yeah.
the real max was we had 8 at home.
Yeah. That's still a lot. I have 5. I have 5 kids.
It's a great starter family.
It's a lot of fun, a lot of energy, and so I always like to talk about family and kids. And 8's that's enough right there.
You learn to run things kind of like an army.
Yeah.
It's like once you have 8 kids at home, when your kids come in and throw their backpacks on the table, if you have 3 or 4 kids, they can do that.
Yep.
But about 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, like kids, no more backpacks on the table. You got to put your stuff away, and you can't hang your coats on the the side, just because there's literally no. So you start to develop some different systems, and it works, and they take care of one another. And it's 5 kids is perfect. Congratulations to you.
Thank you. I'm a blessed man. And so you're in Salt Lake City. How long have you been there?
I moved to Park City 30 years ago for a ski season, and discovered spring and summer in the mountains, and never went back to Texas.
Yeah. Okay.
And then now I moved to Salt Lake, where I have a studio there, and
Yeah, I saw you at a studio. That's very cool. We're trying to build a studio. We are going to build one here in Arizona, Southern Arizona, small film studio. I mean, small compared to, these big studios. But you said yours is 11,000 square feet?
10,000.
10,000, yeah. It's a nice little size.
And we do. I look at it. It's a creative factory. It's I bought it in the midsummer of 2020. It had been a recording studio for 27 years, and that was the COVID time, and so everybody else was contracting, and so my instinct is to zig when others are zagging. So I'm like, okay, expand.
Yeah.
And so now I have 7 full-time editors, 150 terabyte network server, 9 edit bays, cameras, lights, and I don't even know how to turn on a camera. It's like, that's just not, but we've got all the equipment, and I walk in that building and it fills me with joy.
I bet.
When I'm filming and I'm sitting in our dark, quiet set, and people are sharing their brilliance, and I know a camera is rolling, And it's like, I own that. I got that. It feels like money in the bank. Like
Capturing magic.
I've got so much that I've been filming on a series that's coming out that I've spent a fortune and nobody even knows about it. And I'm wealthy beyond belief because I have this vault full of brilliance
Wow.
that I haven't even told anybody about yet.
Can you give us a little tidbit of anything about it?
Yeah, so this is the coolest idea I've ever had. I'm filming the world's best coaches, personal development executive, the world's best coaches. These are guys like one of them charges $1 million a year per client. Phil Stutz, who Jonah Hill did a documentary about him that's on Netflix right now called Stutz. He's one of them. I'm filming the world's best coaches, doing a documentary about them, but then I'm having them do 3 straight-to-camera coaching sessions. So the viewer actually gets to coach with one of these coaches that you wouldn't be able to afford, and they're not taking clients if you could afford them. I was going to do a docuseries out of it and would do 10 or 12. And the stuff was just so good, I kept going. And so I'm over 40 of them now.
Wow.
Haven't released anything yet.
Wow.
And so we're releasing it as a year of transformation where somebody will get one a week.
Wow.
And these have had a profound impact on my life.
That's amazing.
Just
So it's like
watching
a master class that you'll be able to.
on a weekly basis with.
So you got 40, so you need, 57, 58 weeks a year?
So I'm going to do 100 because I want people to be able to rotate out of content. Like I wouldn't care for any parenting coaching. My kids are all grown.
Gotcha, yeah.
But you might really enjoy a couple of weeks thrown in there of some parenting. Yours may be surviving parenting with 5 kids, but,
exactly.
But so we'll have some great parenting coaching. So I'll have some content. I think some people may want a Christian coaching, and other people that wouldn't be of interest to. So I'll have stuff they can toggle.
That's very cool.
But it is.
That's a great project. So I'm sure you have a pretty robust Rolodex of contacts now, of pretty influential mover and shaker people.
I know more people than anybody. Probably that you. I am rich in my database of friends and contacts because of the work I do.
Yeah.
I spend my days interviewing experts on topics that I'm interested in. So, and they all introduce you to other people, and so suddenly, I know lots of
Very
cool people.
So, out of all those people that you interviewed, off the top of your head, is there someone that you, I don't want to say favorite, but what was one of the most interesting individuals you spoke to?
There's a guy named Ben Hardy who is a psychologist, and he did some sessions on, he wrote a book called Be Your Future Self Now. And the psychology has been built on the premise that your past creates your present and your present creates your future. And the new research and what Ben is espousing is no, your future creates your present and your present creates your past. And where this is very practical advice, the vision that you have of the future you tells you what to do today. So an example is his son is a tennis player and playing high school tennis. His coach said, "What's your goal?" And he said, "I want to play college tennis. I want a scholarship." And so the coach said, "Well, what about going pro?" And so Ben's son was like, talked to his dad about it and said, what about going pro? They live in Orlando. If he wants to play college tennis, there's 100 different academies or coaches that can get him there. But if he wants to go pro, there's 1 or 2. And so if he decides to go pro, it demands today a different decision of who is my coach? How do I train today? What do I do today based on? So Ben took us through we've seen how much we've changed in the last 10 years. everyone, you can look back and see how much. But if we project ourselves out into the future, we tend to stay kind of level. Like the 10-year future me is slightly slimmer, slightly more muscular, and older. And that's wildly inaccurate. If you look at all that I've changed in the last decade, if I continue that on, so he helps people create that future self and make it bigger, make it more accurate, and then declare a loyalty to that future you, that anything that doesn't support the future you that you're envisioning isn't allowed in.
Yeah,
it was a spectacular, and they've all been good.
Very cool. That's fun. I was just shooting a podcast before this one, and I was talking about what I call the God-given personality, or our blueprint, and that we have to ascend towards that.
Yes.
And it's already established and created, and we have to visualize it, see it, and then ascend towards it, work towards it, and grow into it. And
I love that.
yeah, and so that's what I'm trying to do.
Me too.
And we'll be doing it for our whole life,
and we're
because
both,
it's a shifting landscape of
we're
ascension.
thinking too small.
Yeah.
When we envision the best we can envision, by the time it gets here, it can be better than we ever imagined.
Yeah.
So help me think bigger.
Yeah, well, me too. Have you heard of a book called the Urantia book?
No.
Okay. That's a book I think you'd love. It's a book that I read. It's over 2,000 pages. It started coming through an anonymous sleeping prophet in 1911. It took many, many years, and it was published in 1955. And it's this vast book of spiritual knowledge. It talks about the history of this planet, the cosmos, the world's religions, and then the life and teachings of Jesus. And the life and teachings of Jesus, I think you would really love, and it would blow your mind, because we were talking briefly about Jesus before we started the podcast, and it's a much more vast cosmic interpretation of his life on this planet and why he came here and why he was killed. And my belief is he didn't come here to die for our sins. And the duality is that he allowed it, because he allowed it to happen, in that sense he did, but that's not the main reason why he came. He came to live a life as a perfect human, to show us how to live, by the fruits of the Spirit that he embodied. And he allowed the crucifixion to happen, but he was more assassinated and killed for the same reasons some of the good men that you mentioned before were killed. John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Gandhi. These men who were leaders, they rocked the boat. They rocked the established system. They had courage, and they came against the powers that be of the time, and they were taken up because of it. And I think Jesus did that. And so there is that duality again, that he went to the cross. And so he did die for our sins in that sense, but I personally don't feel, and the Urantia book doesn't teach, that he came here for that reason. But out of his love and his sacrifice, he allowed it to happen. But the Jesus of the Urantia book, he's a freedom fighter, and he's a truth teller, and he's a man embodied in power and beauty and gentleness and all the values, I think, that we are constantly trying to find as men or just human beings on this planet. And so I just bring it up because I think you seem to be a well-read man, and it's just full of beauty.
I've been trying to figure out.
It's a revelation.
I've been trying to figure out for the last couple of weeks where Jesus fits into my spirituality and what I think of him.
Yeah.
I'm not a participant in any traditional religion. I don't have, I don't know where he fits, but I pray to him.
Yeah.
I pray through him, and so my heart yearns. And so I this will be an interesting addition to, because it's something I've been literally thinking about for the last couple of weeks. Is okay. Once you reject traditional Christianity or traditional religions, then for me it left a vacuum that now I fill with spirituality, but it needs to be informed by knowledge, not just thought.
Yeah, it can be too open. There's a lot of esoteric teachings in the world that aren't directionalized, So when you leave the antiquated dogmatic religions and the organized religions of today, there has to, my belief is there has to be some type of system that you then, and it could be multiple
but there needs to be a framework.
But you have to have a framework to live your life by.
I agree.
And, I'm like you. I don't prescribe to any religion, but I do prescribe to Jesus, the cosmic Christ, and who he is, and the Son of Man, and a lot of vast teachings, and I pray to Jesus too. And I have many conversations and arguments with Christians and non-Christians and atheists, and it's a great subject. But I've met atheists who are more Jesus-like than many Christians, which is a very interesting thing, because they actually exhibit the fruits of the Spirit and act more like Jesus would than the hypocrisy and the self-righteous Christians. And so, to me, it's about who you are and what you do, and not what you say or think. Because you can say anything, you can think anything, but your actions reveal, are you an ascended being? Are you a conscious man or woman? Are you actually trying to live by the fruits? Are you showing love, compassion, non-competitiveness, non-judgmentalness? A lot of us think we do, but in the times where we need to show those things the most, we can fail, because of the human nature of our lower selves can take over, and, it's hard. But I appreciate that you seem to be a very conscious man, and you're going through your journey. And thank you for sharing all of this with me in your process. And it's really cool that this all started. We can talk about all these things because I saw your documentary, and so that's a testament to the power of your filmmaking. And it's more than just RFK. I think when you're creating, like you say, when you feel there's magic being captured on the camera, we know that it's more than what's just being captured. It's a doorway to discovering even more, and steps in consciousness and discovery. And so if you can achieve that, then you're doing your job well, which I think you are.
Thank you.
So thanks for coming on my show. I really appreciate you taking the time. And
thank you for having me.
I'm sure I'll have you again when it's divinely led.
Thank you.
Thank you. Subscribe, like, share, follow. You know the routine. Thanks for listening.